Trent Cotney and John Kenney are dedicated to helping the construction industry with legal business and safety challenges. Welcome to this week's episode of Law and Mortar.
Hey, this is Trent Cotney. We're here with another episode of Law and Mortar. As always, I've got John Kenney with me. John, how are you doing?
Doing great. It's good to be here again today.
Yeah, we've got a lot of neat things to talk about. I want to kind of lead off with some questions that I've been getting here recently. As you know, in roofing and construction in general, there's a ton of use of subcontractors, sub-labor, 1099s, consultants, all that kind of stuff, right? And we're always getting questions. I'm getting it from the legal side, and you're getting it from the business side about, how do you properly deal with these? What are the different legal issues, insurance issues, all that kind of stuff. And lately, we've had a lot of disputes arise over salespeople leaving, getting new jobs, transitioning, whatever it might be. And one of the things I've been working with several contractors on is really beefing up their independent sales reps agreements, making sure that, you've got some restrictive covenants in there, that you're trying, where you can, prevent them from, contacting customers and taking proprietary information. It's important to have all that ironed out, because if you end up in a dispute, you want to have something to turn back to. So on the business side of things, John, what are your customers saying?
Yeah, biggest thing is, as far as the agreements go, absolutely, that's where a lot of them are getting in trouble. They don't have the do not contact my clients, do not take my clients, and the proprietary information of sales processes. You have to have that, because if I was talking to actually two different contractors, both ends of the country, so it's not even the same market, and they both had salespeople leave, and within a month of them leaving the company, they came back and actually took contracts that were going to be signed with the main company to wherever they went now. And, if you have at least an ironclad agreement, as ironclad as you could be, it's always a legal battle, but you do have a way to stand up on that. Not too long ago, I was an expert witness in a case where for the contractor, and they ended up, I didn't even have to go to court because they won it based upon that knowledge, and they had it in there and was able to testify that is definitely, an industry standard that we have. You can't take people's clients when you leave. You shouldn't do it on the moral factor, but let's face it, it happens every day. So that's what I've been recommending to the clients, is at least make sure that you have, the basics covered. Don't make it so complicated that you may have someone look at it and say, well, this is too wide span and it's not going to uphold. Hit the main ports. You don't want your clients going. You don't want your proprietary stuff, your information leaking out, and you certainly don't want your client lists going with them as well.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to our next point. We were having some interesting conversations right before we started about some of the recent trends and things that you're doing on the consulting side. Why don't you share it with the audience?
Yeah, so, as things shift around, and I'll start out with the R word that we've all heard. And honestly, my opinion on that, and I just want to start with this so we get to it, is who knows? We really don't know. Inflation could be worse, could be better, doesn't matter. But right now, for the most part, most contractors have backlogs. So we got to look at that as an extended out. So where seems to be the biggest issue again, which has always been looming, is recruitment, retainage, and finding people to do the work. And it's not only at the roofer field level, it's all the way up through estimators, salespeople, project managers. It's just a shortage of everyone. So we're kind of looking at, calling them the main five, right? So working with clients, trying to help them improve the recruiting process, which is only one part. And then where it seems to be the biggest area of problems for most is not so much the recruiting, it's the onboarding. That once they're getting them into their office, they're not being properly onboarded. They don't know what a career path is and all the things that come along, which leads to retainage of the employee. So really, I would suggest to anybody to work very diligently on a really good onboarding process. And I'm not talking about making sure your HR sits with them for a day. Be able to explain to that new employee what their path looks like in the company, what your mission, vision, core values are, so they understand. I know it sounds silly, but you're not going to get people to buy in. And then you've got to have some sort of in-house training. You can't depend on completely going outside and having someone do your training, sending them to out to other groups like the manufacturers training. You have to have inside training to develop people through. And I'm not just about workforce, but for your sales, your estimating, you want to have that in-house so people know what their progress going through. And I highly suggest the last part of this to really help with retainage, set up a mentoring program within your company. You'll have people on staff besides yourself as the owner that can work into this mentoring program, have mentoring on a crew, have mentoring inside of one of your business groups, but have somewhere where people can go to ask questions and feel safe and comfortable about asking questions that they may not, when I say safe, people don't want to feel they're asking a dumb question. So have a culture set up for mentoring where you can ask a question and get an answer and feel that it's to help you get better. So that's what I really highly recommend. That's big right now.
Yeah, those are all good points. And, we see the same stuff on our end. As we discussed a lot, if you've got good operations, if you've got a good culture, you can avoid a lot of the internal strife that, ultimately ends up in legal type issues. I had some great conversations along those lines with a lot of the contractors that we know and work with from the North Texas Roofing Contractors Association. Great group. Had the opportunity to kind of speak to them on state of the industry as it relates to legal issues, and we talked about a lot of different things. One of the big topics, in Texas and I guess Florida as well, is insurance. It continues to be problematic. We've talked about it in past podcasts. And the concern that I heard out from that audience, especially in the comments that I received afterwards, was just the uncertainty. The fact the laws are constantly changing and trying to keep up with it and trying to create sales plans and other things like that. But it's difficult to do that if the laws are constantly changing. So, what are you hearing from any restoration contractors or insurance-based contractors that you work with?
Yeah, so there's always a trend to want to get away from doing more insurance work. So in that end of it, it's kind of almost looking at a larger commercial contractor that wants to get away from more new construction and more re-roof, for one reason and main reason is margins, better margins. But I find a fear within a lot of your insurance type contractors to make a change because they want to do what they know. But I'm also seeing the trend reverse a little bit, as you just made a great point, is it's getting so difficult to comply. And it's not just with the state laws, it's what the insurance companies want people to do and what rates you're allowed to charge, how you're getting paid. The margins are low. I mean, I've looked at some contractors, they have high margins with a good mix, but some of these, and I know there's going to be some insurance contractors out there that are going to tell me they're making great money, and I've seen that. But majority of the contractors that are dabbling, and especially in insurance and restoration, are not very successful because it's a tough business when you're constantly rolling over insurance work. So I think my advice is you should have a mix. I don't think it's good to be 100% insurance oriented and have some retail work as the new buzzword out there is retail, but we always call it, standardized roofing, right? Where you're working directly for owners, less insurance work, have a mix. No matter what your business is, it's never good to have all of your customer eggs in one basket, because when something changes, it's going to affect you drastically.
Yeah, absolutely. And insurance work can be lucrative, 'cause there can be great top line. One of the areas where I think, improvement is always a must is to make sure that, operationally, risk mitigation wise, you are doing whatever you can to conserve that bottom line. And in that world, it's very important that you put those systems and procedures in place, because it's pretty easy to scale quickly in an insurance market. So yeah, great advice. Well, John.
Well, that was one, before you jump onto that, my favorite part of the day, just tagging back on that, you brought up a great point. That's one thing a lot of them don't, contractors get in and don't realize. Your admin is higher. You have to have, you're filling out different portals, you're filing different paperwork. So you got to be prepared. And again, I wanted to tag that off of your systems and procedures comment, because you're absolutely correct. If you got tight prod systems and procedures, you got a lot better chance. Now we can jump to the favorite time of the day.
Yeah. And so I got a good one for you here. This one was actually from about 4 months ago, but apologize. We're going through them as quickly as we can. So this one is from Jamie. And Jamie wants to know what should he look for when he is looking for a roofing. It sounds really what he's asking for is what are the qualifications for a good roofing subcrew? So I'll let you answer. I've got some legal I can throw in there, but you go and go first.
Well, yeah, I don't know. One of the things, and I'll just touch on it briefly and I'll let you hit it. If you're in a state that requires licensing, your subcontractors also need to be a licensed contractor, as is the state of Florida. I know I find a lot of people get into issues with their subcontractors when somebody questions that. But now let's jump back. Let's look at it just strictly from a production operation side. Do they have a safety program like you have? Do they have any kind of training? What is your crew made up of? What I mean by that, do they actually have what we want to call mechanics on the crew? Or are you getting a sub crew of laborers that's going to have poor quality, which is going to reflect back on you? Are they able to live within your payment terms? So what I really recommend here is you should treat a subcontractor no different than any other part of your business. You should have a subcontractor's checklist, and you should have a procedure in place where you meet with your subcontractor. They run them through all your processes and procedures. Make sure that they're going to follow the same way you are, because like it or not, whoever you're working for does not care who that sub is. They've hired you to do their job, Jamie. So you are only as good as your weakest link, whether it is an internal employee or an external subcontractor that you're using. So you want to actually run them through the same gamut that you would your own internal roofing crews.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing is insurance, man. You really got to make sure that your sub labor has got, adequate CGL and workers' comp. Absolutely critical. Don't just take COIs, certificates of insurance, get the policies, understand what they have, because that can break you. If you've got a sub crew that's underinsured or no insurance, it's only a matter of time before you got a widowmaker. So do what you can to do your homework in advance, vet your crews, vet your sub labor, make sure that you've got that checklist in place, and that's going to help you a lot. So John, with that, we have come to another end of Law and Mortar. Stay tuned next week for another episode. As always, if you want to get hold of me, feel free to reach out to me. I am Trent Cotney. You can reach me at trent.cotney@arlaw.com. John, how can they get you?
J. Kenney at cotneyconsulting.com.
Great. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.
Take care now.